How's it going, guys? Today's tutorial is going to show you how to implement a dynamic camera into a 2D platformer in GameMaker Studio. So to get started, I've got a basic collection of sprites here. I got several blocks in my player sprite, just all placeholders right now while I further develop the game. Okay, and then we've got a few objects down here. You see we've got our main player object, our camera object, and then a parent for solids used for collisions, and then a block object. So let's open up the player. You see in the create event I've got a couple variables used by the platformer, just pretty standard stuff. But the camera is actually going to be referencing a couple of these, such as GRD, which is initialized when the player is on the ground, it equals 1, and if they're not, it equals 0. And also the direction that the player is facing, the camera will need to use. Okay, so after the player's variables are initialized, we come in and we create a camera object. So what we do is we use a cam equals instance create, and what that does is create a camera object at the exact location of the player and assigns it the variable cam for easier reference later on. Okay, then we go down and we set the view object to cam, and what that does is enables the view inside the room to follow our camera object. And then we set our view H border and view V border to be half the width and height of the view to keep the camera centered. Okay, and there's a couple more variables that are exclusive to the camera, such as HDist and VDist. Those are the default values for how far away the camera will be from the player. X2 and Y2 are variables that tell the camera where it needs to be moving to. So these are relative to the player's X and Y positions. Peak is a variable to determine if the player is looking up a tall wall or looking over a ledge. And the last variable is cam speed, and that determines how quickly the camera will move from one point to the other. The lower this value is, the more quickly the camera will move. 15 is a pretty good starting value I've found in most cases. Okay, so that's the camera's creation. So we come to the step event. I've got several pieces of code here that just handle the general player interaction with platforming, but right before the end here we actually are going to move the camera. So our default behavior for the camera is to be looking ahead in the direction that the player is facing and slightly up from the player. So we take the player's X position and the direction they are facing and multiply that by the HDist variable we declared earlier. And then the Y2, is based on the player's Y, and then we subtract the VDist variable we had earlier, which moves the camera up slightly vertically from the player. Okay, but we've got a couple special cases where the camera will need to move to different positions. So the first one we have is if the player is in front of a tall wall, the camera's X2 will come back and be only slightly in front of the player, but we see our Y2 variable is now Y minus VDist times 3. So what that will do is cause the camera to move up much higher above the player so that you can potentially see the top of the tall wall to determine what's up there, or if you can jump it, or if it's just a wall. Okay, and the next behavior is to see if the player is on the ground and if there is a block beneath them, and if there isn't a block in front of and beneath them. So if they're on a ledge, basically. So our X2 again comes back to just slightly in front of where the player is facing, And then our Y2, you see we now are adding to the player's Y value, vdist times 2. What that will do is move the camera down so that the player can see down the ledge and see if it's safe to jump down, if there's a big hole or there's enemies at the bottom of the ledge. We want the player to be able to know that. Okay, so once the camera's X2 and Y2 variables are calculated, we need to actually move the camera now. So we take the X value and the Y value and use this interpolation formula to determine how quickly the camera needs to move. So the further the camera away is, it'll move quickly, but as it gets closer to the position it needs to be at, the movement will actually begin to slow down slightly. Okay, so that's how the camera movement works. I've set up a quick test room here. Just I put the player object in a few different blocks and little formations to show off all the different functions of the camera. All I've done here is enabled the use of views and turned on the view to be visible when the room starts. So we'll save that and we'll do a quick test play. Okay, so you see we're in the bottom left corner of the room right now, so you can see there's no camera movement. The GameMaker camera cannot move outside of the room. But as you can tell, once we move to the right, you can see the camera is now looking more towards the right. And if we look left, you see the camera snaps to the left and we can see the edge of the room over there again. Okay, and now we've got ourselves a ledge. And if we approach this, you see the camera snaps back and then moves down so the player can see at the bottom of this ledge it is just a hole. So we know we need to jump over. So we jump. Okay, and we can see again the ledge behavior as we look over this. See, it's safe to jump down. So we jump. And we're at the bottom of the level again, so we can see that the camera can't move up any higher. So we'll go ahead and jump up. And we can see over there to the left we've actually got a sample wall. Nothing fancy, but we can see if we move up to it, the camera comes back and then moves up so that the player can see to the top of the wall. Alright, so that's how the camera works. It's pretty useful. It gives your games a much more dynamic and interactive feel as opposed to just, keeping the player directly in the center at all times. It provides, more context sensitive situation and gives the player more of the information that they would actually need. So that's it for this video. If you guys liked it, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you want, subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting out more videos like this as I come up with ideas. Alright, so thanks.